Yo, what's up, everybody? My name's Carson. This is Joe. Joe, can you just introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Joe Milnes or at Direct Sales Joe, if you've ever seen me on Twitter. I'm a cold call sales coach stroke sales team builder, specializing in like cold calling and sales in general. So yeah, excited to be here and having a chat with you.
Awesome. Okay, so can you tell me like how did you get to where you are now? Like what was the process of you're just Joe and then you're Joe, cold caller
Yeah,
Joe.
yeah. So I've been in like direct sales for ages, just over 20 years, which
Wow.
just makes me sound old.
You're old.
Yeah, I am old. So yeah, I started out like doing door-to-door selling for
Okay.
a gas and electric company, then did some solar, um, and then kind of got sick of doing like door-to-door, so I wanted a job that was going to be offer a bit more security and stability. So I went into IT sales,
Hmm.
and that's when I really started to kind of um, upskill, if you like, it in sales and treat it in a bit more serious. Because here in the UK, we don't really treat sales as like a vocation. We just treat
Hmm.
it as someone that we think people are good at. We're like, oh, you've got the gift of the gab, you'd be good at like
Yeah.
selling. Um, and so for me, it presented an opportunity. So I learned and practiced as much as I could, learned how to articulate a sales process, train people. And then in the last sort of 5 years, got into management and more recently into building sales teams. My
Hmm.
last sales kind of foray was building a sales team from scratch for a technology company. And we went from a standing start to 1.2 million monthly revenue in less
Hmm.
than a year, purely cold calling. So it's
Wow.
pretty much all getting up on the phones. So yeah, that's kind of me, and that's where I'm at now. Relatively new to the agency game. Started off in February or March time this year, so it's been a really steep learning curve. So
Hmm.
all the systems, the software, getting to grips with everything. Obviously, I'm old, so it takes a lot of things. It takes a lot longer to kind of get up to speed with things, but really enjoying it and liking engaging with the community and meeting different people.
Yeah, so like when it comes to what are you doing right now? Have you done cold email? Have you done anything else to like get clients at all? And then what does that compare to the cold calling that you've done?
Yeah, so like I say, in March I started doing cold email, same as everyone else. I kind of discovered like the Black Hat Wizards course, did
Yeah.
that, started doing cold email. The reason I got really excited about it is because I think a lot of people are learning marketing or are good at marketing and can do the cold email and the LinkedIn automation, but not so many people have got the experience in sales, training sales teams, teaching people to close and things like
Mm,
that. So for me, I just thought if I can nail the marketing side of it, like the cold email, the cold LinkedIn, and position my services like the sales, everything next to it, then it'd be a really good opportunity to charge higher ticket than just kind of straight lead gen.
yeah.
Um,
Sorry, go
so
ahead.
yeah, that's kind of where it is. Like I say, it's still relatively new to me, the cold email and the cold LinkedIn. We're in a group like the Sean's not to 10K group, the closing clients group, which has been really helpful for me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of knowledge in that group, and it's kind of yeah, it's really good. And more recently, I've joined the growth partner program with
Oh yeah.
Straight Line Ad as well. So again, lots of knowledge, lots of value knocking around. It's just down to me now to implement it, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. So, uh, when it comes to like have you read this? There was a book I read a while. I think it's called Fanatical Prospecting. I forget who it was
Yes.
by. Yeah. So I know that that guy's approach, I think is Jeff something. Um, his approach was just call a whole bunch of people a lot. And his main thing was setting up or helping create better sales teams with cold calling. So is that kind of the approach that you take with some of the clients that you have, or are you also doing like so like when you say you're setting up your agency, is that the approach you're taking? Because I think that's probably the more not scalable model, but it's probably the higher ticket model because like a lot of the bigger companies kind of do that. I noticed, you know.
Yeah, so like I always say like the biggest problem with people doing sales and like thinking about sales is that they just don't do enough. They'll read loads of sales books, or they'll follow like bow-tied sales guy like religiously, like looking at all these tweets, like soaking up all this information. But no matter how much you learn or how much you take in, unless you're like executing it and giving yourself a chance to practice on sales course, calls, cold calling, like just implementing it, it never kind of sinks in. So the reason I think Fanatical Prospecting is quite a good book is because that concentrates on just doing more. Like
Mm-hmm.
you see it on Twitter all the time. Like people say, like if you are more proactive and just relentlessly pursue, like sending more cold emails, getting on more calls, just doing more cold calls, doesn't matter what you know, really. If you do
Mm-hmm.
500 sales calls, you aren't going to be bad at the end of those 500 sales calls. You're going to be
Yeah.
much better than someone who's read 10 books and then done 10 sales calls.
Yeah.
So I do really like that ethos. And I just think it's the biggest problem and the biggest hurdle to overcome with sales is just throwing yourself into it and just learning and just being fanatical about getting in contact with your prospects.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like when it comes to cold calling, what do you think it's a different script that you use? Like when you started learning like cold email, was it very different from the cold calling or uh yeah, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, so it's in the way I kind of think about the sales process is you can split it up into three parts. So you've heard of like Russell Brunson and like he's got the hook, story, and the offer.
Yeah.
With a sales process, take it similar. So you've got the hook, then you've got like I call it the wedge, which is like the discovery or the part when you're trying to get the prospect to open up about trying to find a gap or however, that's a kind of discovery phase, and then you've got the closing bit at the end or agreeing next steps.
Mm-hmm.
The hook can either be your cold email, your LinkedIn message, LinkedIn voice note, or it can be the introduction to a cold call, or it can be like a very initial thing. So it doesn't matter what platform you're using. The really important part of the sales process is that hook and that opening gambit.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to achieve in all of those is exactly the same. So you're trying to generate curiosity about what you might deliver for the prospect, and you're building credibility for them to think, actually, this guy might be okay and might be able to deliver what he's saying. If you
Mm-hmm.
can establish those two things, then it doesn't matter whether you've done it on email or whether you've done it on the first 30 seconds of a cold call, or you're doing it on a LinkedIn voice note, or you're dropping LinkedIn messages. If you succeed at that point, then all you've got basically is like you've got a chance where the prospect's saying, okay, look, I'll hear you out.
Mm-hmm.
Show me what you got. Like, ask me some questions. You've just got like a safe space where you can like you've got room to kind of breathe and to kind of build up a service offering.
Yeah. So with within that, and I know I keep kind of coming back to cold calling, but I think it's just
Yeah,
unique that I don't really know about.
yeah, definitely.
So when it comes to like the messages I send on Facebook, they get pretty saturated pretty quickly, or like on email, you know, quick question is so saturated now. And it's like in the beginning, everyone's like, oh, use quick question. And then it's like now
Yeah,
everybody uses it to where it's like, okay, now the response rate is lower. So when, you know, when it comes to, let's say if I do outreach on Facebook, I use the same message. All the other people start using the same message because they all copy me. And
yeah,
uh, then it's like, okay, this is no longer effective. Then I have to be strategic and create something new and exciting. And then I get a ton more replies with this new and exciting message. And then it just like it becomes old and I have to do it again, do it again. So is that kind of the same with cold? Like, has it changed over the past 20 years or has it been pretty this similar over the past 20 years? Like have you noticed a difference in that?
Um, not really, but like obviously the messaging has to change, like it
Yeah.
evolves all the time. So the most important thing with cold calling is that as human beings, we are conditioned so that we make a decision very, very quickly when we pick
Hmm.
up the phone as to whether we want to talk to someone or we don't. Especially if it's gatekeepers, it's like a click run response. So if you don't even have to think about it, but if you pick up the phone and it's a withheld number, you've
Hmm.
instantly got something there and you're thinking, okay, this might be a sales call. If you then hear some office noise in the background, that's like strike two. You're thinking, no, this is definitely
Hmm.
like a cold call sale. Then if there's someone says, like in a really monotone voice, hi, is that Carsten Fox? Hi, Carsten, how are you doing today?
Yeah.
Like a really disingenuous kind of thing. You're instantly thinking that's three things. You very quickly made a decision, probably at that point, that you don't want to speak to someone.
Hmm.
So the art of being really good at cold calling is to break that association. So when you want to like come through on the phone, you want to sound like completely different to anyone who's sat down at an office, like cold calling, just going through a list. So I always like to convey that I'm like really busy walking around and there's a specific
Hmm.
reason why I've just called you at that moment.
That's so
I
good.
like, however, create you can get really, really creative, and that's why I like did a webinar for the Closing Clients group like a few months ago, and just before that to kind of test, we did some work with one of the guys on cold calling scripts for like e-commerce.
Hmm.
E-commerce, everyone knows if you call via email, if you email in, you have to send like a shed load of emails just to get a response. But cold calling, I think I got two meetings in half an hour because it
Hmm.
was just because people just weren't used to being cold called,
Yeah.
and you can just associate it with something else. So if you go through and you say to an e-commerce, oh look, the reason I'm calling is my girlfriend's just tapped me on the shoulder. She's just been looking at your website,
Hmm.
and knowing what you do, I thought I'd give you a call. Like she's just come in this second, tapped me on the shoulder, and that's why I'm calling you now. Because you're just putting yourself in a position where you just want to call them at that point. They're just thinking, oh, this isn't a cold call. This is someone who's literally, and then you've just got that bit of space where you can start to build your value offering in there. But it's all about coming across completely differently to anyone else who's trying to contact them on that day.
Yeah, that is true. That is like, and I teach that a lot usually. It's like when you, Dan Kennedy says unique. Uh, no, he doesn't say unique. So I say unique offer, unique audience, unique channel. Like Dan
Yeah,
Kennedy will say, the media, the audience, and the offer, which is basically the same thing. But I just say you want to have a unique version of those things because if you're doing what everybody else is doing, then you're not gonna, you have diminishing returns. Or it's like the return isn't going to be as high if you say, hey, quick question, and then cold email to ecom brands because like they get hundreds of those a day.
yeah,
So so I say, look, you can try a unique approach to that channel. So like on Facebook, we have a really unique message now that like not a lot of other people are doing, or sending like video messages, which is very unique. Or you can use a different channel, like that's why I kind of teach SMS because SMS no one's really doing it, and everyone does cold email, and but cold calling is another one where it's like no one's really. I mean, people do it, but I don't think it's to the extent where it's like cold email is just easier to do. It just seems easier where you just send out a couple hundred cold emails and no one replies and call it a day. But so I think that's really interesting. And then when you were saying something about having it have unique where you're not in an office setting, I was thinking like, what if you did it to where you played like car noise in the background as if you're inside of a car, where you just actually call people inside the car, and so they can
yeah,
hear the
yeah.
car noise in the background. That's pretty interesting.
Anything, or even like one of the best salesperson I've ever worked with. He always used to kind of stand up and walk around, so he just sounded like he was rushing. And he'd say, "Look, I
Um,
just wanted to give you a call before I'm in the next meeting." And it sounds silly, and people would say it's silly, but like the guy did stupid numbers
hmm,
because he sounds busy and he sounds important. As long as you can put distance between you and that person in that call center,
Hmm.
So like if you're on the call, if you're out on the street on the mobile, anything like that, just to differentiate yourself, then yeah, it will work. And it's interesting that I'd seen you've been doing like the voicemail drops.
Yeah.
Um, the same kind of principle applies with that, like because effectively when you're doing the voicemail drop, it's like the first 30 seconds of a cold call. It's just
Yeah.
you've got to get enough curiosity in there so they think, oh, actually, I'll give them a call back. Um,
Yeah. Have you tested that at all? Voicemail drops for
I
like sales
haven't
teams?
done, I haven't, no. So I did a few stuff, and I've been just doing stuff with the sales team with LinkedIn voice notes. That has really, really good success in some demographics, and then really, really like weird people out if they're
Hmm.
older than like 45. But yeah, it's amazing how different things perform differently on that. But
Yeah.
yeah, how have you been finding the voice notes?
Yes. The
Not
thing
the
is
voice
that
notes, sorry, the
yeah.
voicemail drops.
I haven't really tested. Wait, so with the voice notes that you're doing on LinkedIn, is that are those automated?
So those aren't, no, and that's the
Okay.
that on the one thing it's a very, very high hit rate and a very, very high spot response rate, but it's not really scalable for doing it for clients. It's only
Hmm.
kind of doing your own outreach where you could do. That's why I was interested in to hear how the voicemail drops had gone.
Yeah, so it's like because the thing is that when you can send it out to a couple hundred people, you'll get a couple callbacks. So it's probably not as effective as cold calling. But the thing is, when people call back, they usually don't even listen to the voicemail. They just saw that somebody called and they just wanted to call them back. And so I'll just
Right.
get people calling me back like, "Oh, why did you call me?" Or I just want to see, because I think it's like a potential client or something. And so then you have to kind of restate whatever you said in the voicemail. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I mean, I think what's cool about it is that you'll get on the phone with people that they can't really give you an excuse as to why they can't talk to you right now, or they're busy because they called you. And usually, I mean, they're more open to stay on the phone rather than just hang up. I haven't tested cold calling a ton. Like I haven't really done it, so I can't say what the differences between those two. But I know that it's a pretty easy way to just get people interested and get them on the phone with you. So it's if because I talk to a lot of people that are like, I just want leads or I just want something quick. And so it's like, oh, you can just send out a whole bunch of voicemails and then, get on the phone with people and see what they're saying or what they're interested in. So
Yeah.
um so with the voice notes, what's the script there? Are you just saying, hey, first name, you'll say their first name, so it's personalized, and you say, hey, I just want to see if you're interested in blah 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 with the hook and everything. Because I wanted to test that out with Facebook, but I haven't done that yet.
Yeah. So generally, anything where it's kind of voice related will be very, very similar. Um, because it comes across in the same way. So it's literally you're just looking for something to demonstrate credibility and induce some curiosity. So never tell them exactly why you call him because they have to engage with you for the next bit. Um, so yeah, something like, "Hey, first name, just been on a conference call with one of your counterparts," or something like insert a bit of social proof there. Something came up in that conversation I thought would be really beneficial for X company.
Hmm,
Like, give me a call back. If it was voicemail, just wondered if it'd be appropriate to have a quick conversation.
interesting.
Just let me know. So the biggest mistake people make normally when leaving voicemails or messages or anything like that is they will tell them what they want to sell them, like specifically,
Hmm.
and then they just make a judgment and they'll be like yes or no. So you've not got any chance to kind of build a value proposition or engage or find out where they want to be or what problems they've got. So you just want to get them curious enough so that they'll just give you a shot to ask a few more questions.
Yes. What would you say the difference between those two are? Because that's kind of confusing. If so, are you saying you don't want to say the offer within what I'll say, and let's say a direct outreach message, and I know what I would usually say is, hey, I can bring you 40 to 100 appointments this month if you're interested. Uh, and so that would be the offer. And it's not obviously the offer is really, hey, it costs this much. We have, you'll get this guarantee or whatever. And so I'm not saying all that, but I'm just saying, hey, I'll get you this end result. And so you're saying that's
Yeah,
kind of what
so
you said.
yeah, it's it's a difficult one. So generally in cold calling, I wouldn't give the offer straight away if I was phoning up for like a complex sale. Whereas on email, obviously you've got to put the offer, and that's the main thing. But if you look at a cold call or a voice note as just the hook part of the sales process, so before the offer,
Hmm.
then all you're wanting to do is just generate curiosity to give yourself a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And then normally I would ask a couple of or two to three kind of qualifying questions, or like instead of like rapport building questions, I just have some a quick fire qualifying questions that lull them into a conversation. So if it was a say e-commerce marketer, um, it'd just be like, look, girlfriend tapped me on the shoulder. She was just on your website now. Like the look at what you guys are doing. Just wondered if I could run something by you. We've got a couple of moments. Um, so I
Hmm.
noticed online you've got a bit of email marketing. What do you use there? Is it Clavio, etc.?
Yeah.
Okay, do you do that in-house or out-house? In-house or do you outsource? Oh, we do it in-house. Okay, and then you could go into the offer at
Hmm.
that point. So it's just rather than kind of, hey, here's my offer, you're just trying to like get them into a little bit of a conversation first.
Hmm.
So it just feels a little bit more natural.
Okay. Interesting. And do you do that with the LinkedIn voice notes or anything else?
So LinkedIn voice notes, I would just leave it. I wouldn't give them the offer then at all,
Hmm.
because just trying to get a conversation in those instances. So rather than say what they're going to get so they can make a judgment, I just want to show relevance, induce some curiosity, and then just wait for them to come back, because you'll
Hmm.
get you'll get a lot more people come back that way because they haven't judged you on your offer, and then you've got chance to kind of do a slightly slower sale
Yeah.
with a higher hit rate. So you're not worrying about just having to send loads out and then you just get positive responses back. You'll get a lot more people coming back on the kind of, oh, okay, that sounds, yeah, what do you mean? Like, and then you can nurture them from that point onwards.
Yeah.
Once
That's
you're in a conversation, it's a lot easier to nurture those leads to a meeting.
that's true. Yeah. So I think the hard part that the reason I've always said like just go out with a direct offer, and the reason for that is because whenever I did a message that was saying, hey, you know, how are you doing? You know, how's your day? Like, how's business going?
Yeah,
And then they'd be like, great. And then it's like, okay, well, that's great. I don't know. How's your kids? And it's like just trying to, how do I lead that over into a sale? So, is there a framework that you have to uh, go from, not saying the offer, not being as direct, but just kind of piquing curiosity and leading over into a sales call? I know. So, what I would usually do is direct offer. If they say, yes, I'm interested. Okay, great. Here's what we do. Do you have ask qualifying questions? So like one, two, three, or do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have that? They say yes, 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 and say, okay, great. How's tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Or I would give some value in some way. Like if I were you, I would do this, this, and the other. And then are you free to chat sometime tomorrow? So that's how I've been booking calls, and it works pretty well for me. But I'm always like, to me, it's not about what my ego or what's best or what I think is best, but what actually is best. So what if that makes any sense. Like,
yeah. So
um,
and it's different, like different messages. So for instance, when I'm doing my LinkedIn for my agency, my
mhm,
first message will have the offer. So if it's a written message, it will have that offer. But if I'm using voice for anything, then I will leave the offer out,
mhm,
if that makes sense. And I find that works better,
interesting.
especially on cold calls. So if you're thinking for for a cold call, because you're in a conversation with them, it's they have to feel that they're involved in a conversation and they're not being pitched to straight off the bat.
Yeah.
So in a cold call situation, definitely, I would always kind of lead with just something a little bit vague that leads us there might be a benefit, a couple of questions so that they feel like they're in a conversation, and then you drop your offer almost as if, look, if we could increase your revenue by X, Y, and Z, and you didn't pay until you got that, would you have any objections in finding out a bit more? over a conversation, if you're in a really relaxed, not relaxed, but if you're in a pretty casual conversation and someone sounds like they're a reasonable guy, they sound like they know what they're talking about, and they're like, look, this is what we do. I can't promise it yet, but we don't know enough about you. But would you have any objection in finding out a bit more? It becomes
Hmm.
very, very hard for them to say yes, say no
Yeah,
in that situation.
that's pretty
Um,
cool.
yeah, but it's different. I haven't done enough tests because obviously LinkedIn voice notes, it's hard to scale. So I
Yeah.
haven't done enough testing of that to see whether it'd be best doing the offer up front or not, like you say, because it's kind of it's like a halfway house between cold calling and like cold email or cold LinkedIn. So I would be interested in finding out what that what the metrics were on that. Cold calling, definitely. You just need to give them a little bit more space before you kind of go in with the offer.
Okay, interesting. So when it comes to what you do and setting up the a sales team, what's the process of that? Like what if I wanted to set up a sales team, what would I need?
Okay, the hardest thing by far is finding the right people and finding the right talent.
Yeah.
And it's it's something that over like the last 10 years of building sales teams, and we still haven't got it like absolutely like nailed on. But there's certain things that you want to look for and incentivize. Firstly, if you're recruiting SDRs, never ever ever recruit them on like a time only, like
Hmm.
a pay per hour or pay per day. Ideally for SDRs, you want commission only and just pay for appointments so that what you're paying them is driving the behavior that you're trying to get out of them.
Hmm.
I was speaking to a friend today. We're doing some stuff together, and he was like, oh, "Yeah, we got a few SDRs, but they weren't really performing, and they're on a day rate, and it's yeah, of course they're not performing. They're just getting paid whether they get the results or not. For good SDRs, you want really, really hungry people who are back themselves enough to take like a paper appointment or a paper lead, paper lead
That's
model.
yeah, it's good because I mean I have some uh I usually pay VAs like by the hour or like appointment setters a base salary plus a commission, but I think if you took away the base, it's like I always hated that. Like when I did sales and it was like, you had a base and you had commission. I was like, I don't really want to work on only commission because what if, blah, blah, blah happens. But honestly, it's when you're a business owner, you're like this, like I only get paid on commission. Like I only get paid
Yeah,
if someone pays
yeah,
me, right? So it's like it only makes sense now. Um, so that is really good. So what about once you have okay, let's say we have the right person, what's the next process? Is it we have to create a script, find the audience? What is
yeah.
that?
So, well, before when you just after you kind of get the right person. So for interviewing, like it's hard to gauge all the different attributes that it's hard to test like resilience or pressure or how they perform when they're being like interrogated or how their mindset. It's really, really hard to test those things. What you can test though is how they can read a script. So in the interview process, you definitely want to have like a script or a framework written out already. All of them as part of the interview should read that script, and you should say, I want it to sound like someone who isn't in a call center. I want it to sound someone who's like energetic, enthusiastic, credible, and knows
Mm-hmm.
what they're talking about. Give those parameters, and you can judge people literally on how well they read that back to you. The people that sound better there will sound better on the phone, and then they'll get more deep, like they'll get more sales. It's simple.
Yeah,
Um, a lot of people overcomplicate the hiring process. You should just literally test them on what they're going to be doing, and then take the best ones out of that.
interesting. Okay, so what about
And then
sorry, what about
in a second,
what's that thing called? Role playing. Do you do that a lot?
yeah. So it's like because I always say like role playing is it's a little bit sterile and
Yeah.
it's not the same as doing it in anger, but it's a little bit like sparring. in the fact that if you're a boxer, you kind of you're doing this, you have to do hours of sparring. It's not the same as being in a fight, and it's not the same as getting like punched full
Yeah.
throttle in the face. But it exercises the same muscles. It allows you to practice your craft, and it allows you to go in so you're not completely ring rusty.
Mm.
Um, the problem with remote working now is that people will be like just dialing out for nothing. They'll sat for long periods of times not saying anything, like 2 hours or whatever. Sometimes, if you're calling like IT directors or C-level people, you could go like half a day and not speak to anyone.
Mm.
So when you finally get through, if you haven't done any pitching practice or role plays, like the chances of you putting out a good pitch or a big good conversation at that point are going to be really, really low. They're more likely to be like, oh, someone's picked up,
Yeah.
shit themselves, and then like make a hash of it. So yeah, definitely role play and like script reading. Um, in terms of like, because often people say like, should you have scripts or not, or like templates or anything like that. I would say if you imagine sales is a journey from point A to point B. So in the same way, if you move to a city and you've never lived there before, um, if you wanted to get from point A to point B, you would not be able to get there without a map. So a
Mm.
script is like a map if you're unfamiliar with the city. If you've lived there a little while, then you can probably get away with like just going via landmarks. So here in England, we use like pubs. So you could go like to turns right at the Queen's Head, like go there, go left. And you just get by with landmarks. And that so if you've done a load of sales calls, you can probably get by with templates
Hmm.
or like a conversational template. Then if you've done like 1,000+ sales calls, then you probably won't need a script, you won't need a template, but you'll still take the same route because you still got to take the prospect on that same journey. Um, so yeah, it's like really good salespeople will still follow a similar process to people who are doing scripts or templates, but it's just because they've done it so many times, they know what the prospect's after. And if the prospect takes them off script, they'll know exactly how to get them back on track. So
Yeah.
yeah, scripts are definitely they get a bad press sometimes, but for um for most kind of SDR positions, I would say like they're essential to get good performance.
Interesting. Yeah, I think some of the scripts I've had or read over in the past were just very unhuman like to where it's like, you
Yeah,
know, where do you want to be in the next 12 months? And like question like that. I mean, it makes sense, but it's a little too blunt sometimes. But I think people just like follow the script verbatim and they say whatever it says, and it kind of sounds unnatural. That's what I did when I first started, and it was like very weird. Uh,
yeah.
so if okay, let's say you hired me, I'm now doing about to do cold calls on my first day. What do I do? Like, what tools do you set me up with? What's my goal per hour? Like, do you have stuff like that?
Um, so like the tech firm I work with, like we you don't get many tools. Like we've like it's something we've been battling for, but they're quite like old school.
Mm,
So we literally deal with the guys deal with gatekeepers a lot of the time. So that's like another kind of hurdle you've got just to get through to the decision makers. So they will be phoning main switchboard numbers,
mm,
getting through to the gatekeepers. If they can't get through the gatekeepers to the direct person, they'll try loads of different things like going through to accounts payable,
mm,
and saying, "Oh, I was just hoping to get through to X, Y, Z. They've put me through to the wrong person. Can you put me through?" Loads of different tricks to try and get through to the decision makers. And in terms of dials a day, we expect around 100 to 150
mm,
dials each day. Um, the people that we work with aren't purely SDRs, so they do some account management as well. I think if it was pure SDRs, then and you had like the right tools, you should be doing around 200 a day. but that's hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to do cold calling. It wasn't like selling, it was more I was working at a logistics company and it would be like, we needed to get a truck of avocados from Florida to Ohio. So I'd have to call all these trucks in Florida saying, "Hey, can you move some avocados to Ohio?" And so that was my job. And I did like 250 calls a day and it was kind of brutal. But
Yes.
um when you do 250 dials a day, when you say that they're old school, are they just calling directly from their phones? They're just like typing in the number, or do you have some sort of tools available for them to?
Yeah, no, so we've got like a really like crappy like Mitel system.
Okay.
It's just one that they'd thrown up when we got when like COVID came,
Hmm.
lockdown, we just used an on-premise one, and then they were like, oh, we need like a cloud system to fire people up. So yeah, they're just using that. We've got Salesforce, which is fine, but it's like the hardest thing with the CRM is just getting people to make sure that they use it, especially if you've got a big team, just making sure that people are updating it and things like
Yeah,
that.
that's true. Yeah, like adding notes and stuff. So you mean?
Yeah, because it's only good if you use it to kind of remind yourself and things like that. Like it's still one of the things I have to battle with myself about for my own outreach is when I've spoken to people, when I've like chased them up and just like updating it, especially if you're doing cold calling.
Hmm.
Because if you're doing email or anything like that, it's fairly easy to track because you can just like automate it and say, oh, that's when I sent them an email. Whereas
Hmm.
if you're doing cold calling and you're speaking to people more often, it becomes more important than to like manually um,
Yeah.
update the notes. But I mean, there is software that will probably do that for you now. But I think,
Yeah. So like what about why don't they use like lead lists like lead rocks or stuff like that? Like you can just scrape the phone numbers of CEOs and stuff. Or
so
did you see that video of that I made about the Apollo
yeah,
scraping? Yeah.
that is awesome. Um, although for the UK, not so much. So I did a test. I did a test today. Um, I did two tests. One was for Switzerland, where it was two numbers out of 700.
Wow.
Yeah, and the UK it was like less than 10%.
Yeah.
But I'll do some more testing because it can be like industry or like yeah, I don't know, but getting mobile or direct dial data cheaply in the UK is difficult. Like
Yeah.
it's
That makes
yeah,
sense.
it's a tough one.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, like for me, it's usually like out of let's say 1,000 LinkedIn profiles, it's like 200 to 400 phone numbers out of that, which is okay. I mean, pretty good.
yeah, that's
But
pretty good. Yeah.
yeah, imagine. I mean, two numbers. That's crazy. Um, so I mean, like, do you guys only? I mean, okay, with the companies that you are trying to get as clients, and then the clients that you have, are you guys just targeting in the UK?
Pretty much, yeah, just around about over the UK. Some into Europe, uh,
Mm,
but mainly, certainly for the sales team I'm working with, they're all UK. And for my own outreach as well, just targeted UK.
is there a reason for that?
Just think it's um just think it's easier. Like I'm contracted to 3 days a week with the tech company. So I've only got 2 days a week where I can focus on my own stuff.
Hmm.
So if I then add in, so I target in the US, it means that I can only do calls like after 2 p.m. So I've
Yeah,
lost
that's
half a
true.
day. It just becomes a lot, it just makes it easier for me to be able to just niche down, know that the time zone, know the culture and the market.
Yeah.
And like my case studies are all in the UK and things like that. So it just feeds into everything.
Yeah, I just
Um,
think people in the US are like I think they the UK accent is more sophisticated, so they kind of they just think you're smart when they hear you. They're like, oh, this guy knows
I
what he's talking
definitely
about.
like, yeah, yeah. I'd definitely be up for it. And I think Um, Again, it just sounds a little bit different if you're cold calling and you've got a UK accent and you're calling the
Yeah.
US. Like, I'd definitely be open to it. Certainly with teams that I worked with. Just at the moment, time's a limiting factor, so
Mm.
I'm keeping things simple and efficient for the time being.
Yes. Have you tested anything recently that is kind of changed the game for you, or like any? Because I know we all do like a lot of different tests of like, well, try this, try that, try that. So anything that you've done recently that has been getting you better results?
Um, no, like the the cold calling test we did for the e-commerce, that was an eye opener because
Yeah.
for something that was so saturated via one channel,
Hmm.
it when you're cold calling, if you're cold calling a market that is saturated with cold calling, you will know instantly because people are pissed off. And if they're pissed off on like the phone, you know about it because they will literally be like, they're telling you.
Yeah.
So, and with e-commerce, it wasn't like that at all. So I'm convinced there's a really big opportunity there. So I was speaking to another guy off Twitter um, today, in fact. So we're going to fire something up and like test it properly because I think we've done little bits, but I think we're going to test it properly, get a few SDRs and just see what we can do. Because I think if you can couple successful meeting booking with
Hmm.
SDRs on the phone as well as like the email outreach as well, then I think it's a good opportunity there.
Yeah. I think the and the strategy that I with the Apollo, like you can scrape the Shopify stores that between
Yeah,
a certain range, and then you can get the LinkedIn profiles and do that. So you can get those direct. I don't know how, because I know with the Shopify data, a lot of people use like built with, which I think it just gives you the company phone number.
yeah,
Um, and so if you try that, you'll get the direct dial of the owner. I don't know. But that is interesting. So I think a lot of industries don't get a ton of cold calling, or yeah, I think using something unique always works good because when I was doing the logistics, it's like I mean, they got calls all the time, and it's just kind of the
yeah,
nature of the game because like logistics, it's very, let's say the truck broke down, you have to kind of take the call, and so people were pretty open to answering calls. But when I joined that company, I had done a little bit of marketing before that, and it wasn't really as much outbound stuff, but I had done it a
yeah.
little bit, and so I kind of knew. I was like, why don't they do SMS, or why don't they do like voicemail drops to where we can, instead of us, calling me sitting here calling 300 trucks within the local area, why don't I just send a voicemail out and just wait for somebody to call back and say, yeah, I can do it. That'd be a lot easier than having to do this. Um, but I think just being unique,
Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think people sometimes just get scared to test stuff, like
yeah,
especially when it comes to calling, because when you're doing like email or any other channel, in fact, there's like a buffer between you and the prospect. So like you can send a 15,000 emails out, you get 15,000 no's, but just because no one replies to you, but it doesn't really affect you in the
hmm
same way as if you phoned 10 people and 10 people told you to like get lost like straight away. So I think
yeah,
people are like less reluctant to, or more reluctant to kind of just test stupid stuff like pattern interrupts and just see what works and like have a little bit of fun with it.
hmm
Um, and that's the key. Like I saw someone post today, they had got like an 83% open rate on like an email campaign. And everyone was like, "Oh man, that's sick. Like, what are you using? Quick question." He's like, "No, everyone's using quick question. Like, so you're just in with the noise then. So that's why you're not going to get like that. I think to get really exceptional results, you have to put yourself far out there and just be completely different.
yeah,
It sounds like you're doing like a lot of that on like your Facebook, like you say, just with your messaging and also with the different channels that you're using as well.
yeah. And that's the thing. It is hard because it's hard to come up with something new all the time, but it's I think that's just what it takes because it's really boring to get a 1% reply rate on email. It's like it just doesn't work anymore. So, um, it gets very crowded really quickly. And yeah, so I think this is a pretty good discussion about just being unique because I think a lot of people need to hear that because the thing is that a lot of people copy and a lot of people say, okay, well, let me do a quick question too, just because I watched someone in the video, and a lot of people think, which this is what I thought when I first started too, is I just have to copy and paste, click the exact button that that person clicked, and then I'll have what I want. And a lot of people are sold that idea, like, hey, I'll give you the templates, I'll give you the strategies, all you need to do is implement it, and they don't really think for themselves. And so I think that's the hard part where it's like you just have to, if you come up, I say this in my videos, like if you just thought for 10 seconds about something different, you probably would get a ton more replies than I do just because
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, and it's because and people don't realize, I don't think, that the stuff that people post and they say that it's got a really, really good reply rate, it's probably stopped working. Otherwise, they wouldn't post it at that point.
yeah.
It's probably already a little bit saturated. Like,
Hmm.
it makes me laugh, like when people do it and they'll try it, and then if they've got a big audience and they post a game-winning like email strat, everyone's going to use it and it'll start like
Yeah.
capitulating. And then the same people who are just chasing that, thinking, "Oh, I never get really good replies. Are doing exactly the same. I don't know what's happened." It's like, think for yourself,
Yeah.
man. Just have fun with it and just try different things.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's sometimes it's kind of hard to come up with like new copy or something, but it's pretty fun when you find something that actually works. I think that's what all these guys, I feel like we're all chasing that high of just having a better reply rate or having something that like is crazy good. Everyone in the groups are doing that, which is funny. That's what I do. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, definitely.
yeah. So what's your next steps moving forward? Like what's the goal?
So like for me, it's to kind of I've got until the end of the year contracted with the tech company, but I'm on agreement then that at that point I'll kind of say my goodbyes and now double down on the agency. So for me, I've spent probably 6 months getting everything, like learning the systems, doing a little bit of fulfillment, like probably only two or three clients, learning how to use the software, learning how to program like the automations, keep track of leads and things like that. The
Yeah.
stuff that I'm naturally not very good at. Like I
Yeah.
see some of the stuff you're doing and I'm like, man, that guy's a wizard. Like for me, it's like it's an effort to try and keep on top of that like systemized
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, it is really hard. Like when I first started learning some of the stuff, your first initial reaction is, I don't want to do this and this is hard. And that's what I thought. But then, I don't know if you've ever played like an instrument, but like when you're playing piano and when it's hard, you're like, okay, well, this is, that it's working if you're screwing up. And if you're like, okay, well, if
Yeah.
I just redo it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. Um, and so that's kind of how it was for me. And then when I pushed past myself and I was like, look, I'll just do it. I don't want to, even though it is hard, I'm just going to keep doing it. And then after that point, and then it's easy because, I use RoboMotion a lot, and a lot of people are just really confused, which I just wish everybody knew how to use it because it's so powerful. But um, in the beginning, I had no clue what I was doing, but then I just figured it out. And then, yeah, I don't know. But think for yourself. Yeah. So, how can people find you?
So I'm on Twitter, so at Direct Sales Joe. Um, I've been a little bit lazy with Twitter over the last like few
Yeah.
weeks. So I'm getting married next week, so like
Oh,
everything's
snap.
kind of like been crazy.
Yeah. Well,
So yeah,
congratulations on that.
yeah. Thank you, man. Did you say snap or did you say? I thought you said snap, as in, oh, you're getting
Oh,
married as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. No, no, yeah.
no,
Snap, you're getting
no,
married.
cool.
Yeah. Um,
Um, so yeah, but yeah, at Direct Sales Joe, like I will be tweeting about sales calls, cold calling, everything like that.
awesome, man. I think you should I don't know if you make videos at all, but I think I would like to hear a lot of these guys' perspective because there's a lot of cool people in these groups, and it's like I just wish they made more content because I know I talk a lot and no one wants to hear me anymore. So I wish that you guys made more content.